What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Stochastic channel. And today we're talking college football DFS. It's bowl season. We've got day one on Saturday, 6 games. We'll talk the showdown briefly, then the main slate. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. And I got to tell you guys about this before we get into the show. We have a limited time deal. It actually starts today. I'm recording this on the 14th. Not sure when this is going to come out, but it runs through the 21st. And what it is, you can click the link in the video description below and you're getting 50% off your first month. It's basically a month because bowl season's a month of all our college football stuff. So you're going to get projections, ownership projections for the playoff is when we're specifically going to have them. And then you're getting our data usage sheet, which I'll pull up right now behind the glass just to show you guys what we're working with. We'll go through it today as we go through the slate. Looks at all the opportunity metrics for these teams, team by team stuff. And honestly, this package also includes college basketball. I know it's bowl season. It's specifically for college football bowl season. But if you want to try hoops, we'll work really hard on those as well. So again, that's 50% off your first month. It's a month because that's about how long bowl season is. The link's in the video description below. And the promo code is BOWL. Just BOWL. Bowl, like college football bowls. Check it out. Ton of game. The other thing is bowl season's got a ton of games, like even just this week, 6 on Saturday. Then we have a game on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, among other kinds of main slates. So this is almost every single day. Get the most for your money with this 1 month promo for bowl season. But all right, enough of me telling you about promos. You guys know what we're really here for. DFS. And we'll kick things off with the showdown. It's on the FanDuel early slate, so we'll talk mostly about that, but just want to give you a brief overview of Georgia Southern Ohio. It's a 3.5-point spread in favor of Georgia Southern. Total's 48.5. It's mainly an opt-out thing for Ohio that has driven the spread Georgia Southern's direction. They're on the air raid, 32nd in pace with a 62% pass rate. Davis Brin immediately is going to stand out as a safe captain. He has 43 attempts per game, averaging 287 yards. He takes sacks occasionally, negative 37 yards on the ground. That's not anything that's too detrimental to him. And Ohio's weakness on defense is over the top. They're outside the top 70 in pass coverage. But I do think you are getting more value if you're willing to captain a pass catcher because Brin isn't exactly an explosive quarterback. He's averaging under 7 yards per attempt. So a lot of the PPR volume on DraftKings makes a big difference. So when I'm looking at Caleb Hood, Derwin Burgess, those would be the top two. Dalen Cobb and Anthony Quealy have sort of ping-ponged routes of late, which has me a little more nervous for those two. Last game, Dalen Cobb was at 97%. Anthony Quealy only saw 5 routes. The week prior, Anthony Quealy was at 45. Dalen Cobb was at 15. I think some of this is injury related and it has ebbed and flowed throughout the year. Maybe you could look at Quealy as sort of a leverage play over Cobb because I think Cobb is going to be more owned, but honestly, they're both pretty good plays. And then lastly, JJ McAfee is going to be one of your best values in the slate. He technically plays tight end, but he's more of a receiving option there. He's coming off a 74% route rate game. Everyone else, I mean, you're just throwing darts, and I don't even know how many snaps they get. So I'm trying to limit beyond that. Otherwise, Jalen White, I think he's going to be back. He already announced his intention to return next year, which is positive. You don't have any portal stuff to worry about with him. It's Jalen White in about a 70-30 split over O.J. Arnold as long as he's active. I think you can use O.J. Arnold just in case, but, I mean, this would be a small portion of my portfolio. I truly believe White plays, but as usual, make sure you monitor. Georgia Southern does do this pregame radio show. Many of you are familiar with this from a couple situations in the past. You listen to that if you want injury info before anyone else. A lot of people that listen to that don't tweet it out. So that's where you can find it. I'll try to listen to it and tweet it out if I can. On the Ohio side, 116th in pace, 48% pass rate. Curtis Rourke is in the portal, the 2022 MAC Offensive Player of the Year. CJ Harris is out for the year with injury, so we are left with third-string quarterback Parker Navarro. I actually have a lot of interest in him, expecting Ohio to take a run-heavier approach, and Navarro has some electric dual-threat ability according to his high school stats, so take this for what it's worth. He did rush for 959 yards. That's 5.7 yards per carry. and 11 scores in his final season of high school. We're going to talk about a lot of backup quarterbacks on today's video. I think he is the most enticing for DFS just because of that mobility. And on FanDuel, I mean, this is for the early slate. 6,500 is an extremely cheap price tag on Navarro. He kind of makes a lot of things work for you. He already has 107 rushing yards after having barely played this year. The backfield, this is absolutely insane. Bangura portal, O'Shane Allison portal. So the only two running backs that have received carries still on the roster are Ricky Hunt and Quintel Quinn. I don't know who's going to carry most for this team, and I also think Nolan McCormick could be involved. That was from a beat reporter. I read an article by one of the Ohio beats suggesting Nolan McCormick might be involved in this. I'm surprised he didn't play more this year. Nolan McCormick was actually a guy that handled the ball a lot last year when Bangura missed time briefly and O'Shane Allison was out for the year. And then this year he hasn't played a snap. I thought maybe it was an injury, maybe it was a redshirt thing. I don't know, but this is dicey. We just projected it essentially 25%, 25%, 25% between those three backs with Parker Navarro getting the rest. So, I mean, throwing my hands up, I would rather just play Nolan McCormick and take a dart throw on these guys. Otherwise, it's probably just an avoid situation if you don't want to take on the risk. Just play Georgia Southern players to begin with. In the receiving game, Sam Wiglitz is still around, so he's safe. No portal, nothing with him. He leads the team in targets. Miles Cross and Tyler Walton are both in the portal. You already lost Jacoby Jones to an injury for the season. So you're down three of your top four receivers. Basically, you're left with, among target leaders, Wiglitz is the very clear one. Tyler Foster and Will Kasmerek are both tight ends, and they split time almost 50-50. So, I mean, maybe you run into more 12 personnel stuff. They're probably going to run the ball a lot anyway. But what you also might just see is Chase Hendricks play more. I think he's probably going to be your wide receiver 2 in this game. And then I'm guessing you have Rodney Harris as your wide receiver 3. These are guesses more than anything else, but that's according to playing time. After that, I think you're looking at Keegan Wilburn and Caleb Gossett rounding out this Ohio receiver room. Pretty rough stuff for Ohio. Let's get into the main slate. We have a 5-game slate on DraftKings. FanDuel split them all up, but hopefully that showdown stuff gives you enough to work with in the morning window. All right, Louisiana Lafayette takes on Jacksonville State. 2.5-point spread in favor of Jacksonville, 59 total. It's one of the healthier totals on the board for this 5-gamer. And we have Lafayette on a third-string quarterback. They're 79th in pace, 45% pass rate. It's going to be Chandler Fields. He actually has decent efficiency metrics, but I mean, nothing with this offense really wows you. They're slow. They've been run heavy. They do have some portal stuff, a lot of it on defense. He just stands out as a middling play here. Fields doesn't run as much as his counterparts, especially Zion Chris, who has the broken leg. You're not going to see him. Just a middling play if you want to get there. It's a good game environment, but Louisiana Lafayette's not projecting well at this point. Jacksonville State plays reasonable defense overall. A little weaker against the pass, but backfield, this is somewhat interesting. Draylon Washington missed their last game. They absolutely slaughtered their opponent. So probably just a precaution. I would expect him back. He hasn't entered the portal. Without him, Jacob Caboti led the team in carries with 15. Elijah Davis at 14. Again, don't read too much into that. They slaughtered their opponent. I believe it was Monroe, but I could be mistaken. So anyway, if this plays to health, I think you see Caboti lead this backfield, 1. Draylon Washington, 2, if active. Zylan Perry, 3, and Elijah Davis, 4, if active. Caboti actually projects reasonably well, assuming workload, and he would become an even better price play if Draylon Washington misses this game. Moving to the receivers, this is pretty dicey, but we don't have any opt-outs as of right now. Looking at who we project to lead this unit, we'll start things off, I suppose, with Harvey Broussard and co. I don't know. They rotate a lot in this offense, so I think LeBlanc, Robert Williams, Jacob Bernard, and Harvey Broussard are your most likely players to actually do something in this offense. The top 2 in terms of projection for us are LeBlanc. It's mainly a route thing for him, but he technically does lead the team with targets. He's tied with Robert Williams. And then 2, we have Harvey Broussard. This is more of a yards per route run thing for him, averaging 5 targets per game in their last 4. He's also been the most efficient at receiving targets when he's on the field. So it's very narrow gaps between these players. But for me, it's LeBlanc still 1, Harvey Broussard 2. Just when you price adjust at $4K, he makes a lot work. Robert Williams 3, Jacob Bernard 4. And then we get to the tight ends. You see Neil Johnson's pretty high up there. He's just a heavily targeted tight end, but not very efficient. Terrence Carter, Charles Robertson. These are all just dart throws for larger field tournament stuff. Louisiana Lafayette's going to rotate a ton. On the other side, Jacksonville State's first in pace. They're very run heavy, 37% pass rate. But man, Zion Webb, he projects as one of the best raw quarterbacks on the slate for a couple of reasons. One, their implied team total's one of the best, even though it's a tight spread, but they have a 59 total in the game, which is among the higher totals. Webb has the best mobility, I think, of any quarterback on the slate. Maybe Pavia could rival him there, but he already has 638 yards. As a passer, it's not pretty, but he does have somewhat decent receivers. They give the best floor with Webb. I think you could argue ceilings for some other signal callers. You also have a little narrative stuff on his side. This is his 7th year of college. This is his final college game. He doesn't have a future in the NFL. Maybe he plays in like the XFL or something, but yeah, last game for Webb. So look for them to try to use him as much as possible and get a win, especially with the ground stuff. Backfield's a 3-way committee. Malik Jackson led it over Anwar Lewis, over Ron Wiggins in that order. It's going to be a committee to, again, this week. I think the best price-adjusted options probably still Anwar. Prior to last week, where they both had 8 carries, Anwar had been pretty readily ahead of Malik Jackson. Jackson was injured midseason. Now he's back. Ron Wiggins is basically taken, I don't know, a third-string change of pace role. I honestly wouldn't be surprised to see him lead this either. Basically, you've got carries split 4 ways in this backfield, but efficiency shouldn't be too much of a problem for them. I don't know how heavy I'm going to be. It's an awesome running back slate. 4 running backs are going to be viable. This backfield's just not as intriguing as some other ones. Receiving room, we did have some transfers for Jacksonville State, so this is something to talk about. Should consolidate opportunity for some others. Excuse me, it wasn't transfers. They just did this themselves down the stretch. So Perry Carter, Quinton Lane, they both played a monstrous route share. And P.J. Wells, the pricing on DraftKings did not adjust enough to P.J. Wells becoming a full-time player. This guy missed the first half of the season. He's now averaging 4.5 targets per game over their last 4. Route rates nearly 80% for P.J. Wells, and he's flirted with that on numerous occasions. So, I mean, we're just talking about a hyper-involved player in this offense. Last week, he had a 94% route rate. Week prior was at 58%, but not the best game environment. And then he's actually been above 70% in 4 of their last 5. So in competitive games, you basically have Perry Carter, Quinton Lane, P.J. Wells on the field every single snap. Sean Brown at tight end, he rotates a little bit more, so he's not as interesting to me. But yeah, P.J. Wells immediately stands out as one of the best price-adjusted receivers on the slate with his role, even in a run-heavy offense. All right, before we move on, let's talk to you about Prize Picks quickly. They're the sponsor of the show. When you click the link in the video description below, new users, you can deposit, get a first match deposit bonus up to $100, and they are giving you a free month of OddsShopper. We have a ton of tools over at OddsShopper to help you with sports betting. If you're interested in our market-based approach, which you should be, it basically looks at sharp sports books and tries to find lines across the industry that are off. It has proven back-tested success. There's a ton of changes going on with the product, so there's tools to help you with props, sides, totals, and advice from a lot of our experts on there as well. So check it out. A lot going on. Thank you to Prize Picks for that match deposit bonus. A lot of those tools are going to help you with Prize Picks, which is player prop lineup building. And yeah, link in the video description below. Must be 21 to play. If you have a problem gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Game 2, App State, Miami, Ohio. Not the most intriguing game. 6.5-point spread in favor of App State. Miami, Ohio, they lost their QB. The total in the game is 44.5. App State is 46th in pace with a 49% pass rate. This team lost to Troy in the conference title game, and Joey Aguilar had a reasonable game. He's actually been kind of a revelation for this team. 231 rushing yards. That's pretty solid on the ground, not taking a lot of sacks. averages 271 through the air. He has 33.2 attempts per game. The only problem is Miami, Ohio plays good defense. Their defense is mostly intact. I'm surprised. I thought this team was ripe for portal ravaging, but apparently they want to win the MAC next year. So no absences on defense, really. And they play slow. Miami, Ohio, that is. So you're looking at reduced play volume. That does hurt Joey Aguilar. It's reflected in the total of the game. He does not meet value when you look at his projection when adjusted for price. It's because he's 8,400. So Aguilar, surprisingly, not too interesting for me. I'd rather just play Zion Webb and a couple other guys we'll talk about. The backfield is interesting. Nate Noel hit the portal, so Kanye Roberts projects to lead this backfield. But former linebacker Anderson Castle has been playing a role even with Nate Noel in the offense. He has at least 6 carries in 4 straight games. Now we're removing Nate Noel, who has double-digit carries in each of his last games where he was active. Some of that probably is going to go to Anderson Castle. I know it's a bowl game, so maybe you're worried about them using McQuell Haywood, Amani Marshall a little bit. But if you need a really cheap running back at 3,300, Anderson Castle's live. I'm not sure that's where I would go. I think there's a couple cheap receivers that are better, but he is in play. At receiver, all right, this team had a bunch of portal losses. Caden Robinson is not affected. He was the wide receiver 1 before. He's still the wide receiver 1 after. I do think he is worth paying up for because the receiver is really weak on this slate. But as far as the players that left, Milan Tucker, Deshaun Davis, and Kane Sutton. Those are more rotational receivers, but Milan had actually played a fair amount. But those are the players you saw depart. Deshaun Davis, I mean, he did have 2 games of 6 targets in their last 4. So, I mean, he was very active. Now you're looking at Caden Robinson. He's the one. We already knew that. Christian Horn, I think, is the 2. And Dalton Stroman is who I would rank as the 3. Eli Wilson plays tight end. He's actually hyper involved at that position. So you could still use a contrarian Eli Wilson if you wanted. But Christian Horn, I expect his routes to rise from the 64% we saw in the conference title. Dalton Stroman, expect his snaps to rise from the 33% of the routes recently. The only other things you could maybe look at, this team rotates receivers kind of by trade. Mekhi Jackson had a 35% route rate in the conference title game. Michael Herzl, he was at 27%. Just names to mention. I don't think they play ahead of Stroman, Horn, or Robinson, but App State's done this a lot. We're not 100% sure. Miami, Ohio, they lost Brett Gabbert to injury way earlier this year. They now lost Avion Smith to the portal. They're already 130th in pace with a 40% pass rate, which I don't think is going to rise here. Henry Hessen, third-string quarterback, is going to start. This kid has no experience. Really questionable high school stats. He doesn't run a ton. He topped out at 261 yards rushing as a sophomore. Then he fell to 201 as a junior, 210 as a senior. That's 3 yards per carry or worse in all of those seasons at the high school level. As a passer, I mean, he's just a pocket passer, so this team's probably not going to try to use him a lot. I don't really have interest at this price tag for Hessen. You can find better values across the slate. Rashad Amos is interesting. 15 carries in 3 of the last 4 games. He doesn't do a lot as a pass catcher. His route rate has been hovering around 25% lately. I don't know. App State's it's not like they have a great run defense. They allow 5.1 yards per carry, but we're still looking at a touchdown underdog here, and he's not the pass catching back. You'll see Kenny Tracy, Keon Mosey, and Kevin Davis all factor in that regard. Kevin Davis being the primary pass catching back. Tracy did miss their last game, but expecting him to return here. At receiver, if you're getting really contrarian and stacking Hessen, the first guy you're going to look at is Gage Larvadain, who announced he's returning next year, so no worries about portal stuff. He should be healthier now. He did play in the conference title, but he'd been banged up throughout the latter part of the season. His return gave us some clarity on the rest of the receivers. In that game, Cade McDonald, 87% of the routes. Javon Tracy, we saw him at 78%. So that directly cannibalized Joe Wilkins, which was a surprise for me. 13% route rate for Joe Wilkins. I don't know if he got injured or something, but I mean, this guy had only fallen below 70% one other time this year. So that was stark. I mean, it is deserved. He's been terrible. And Cade McDonald, Javon Tracy have been better. Then the last guy, Miles Marshall, he had been at 90% the last 2 weeks. Last week, he fell to about 40%. So Miles Marshall probably not in play either. Looking at Larvadain, 1. McDonald 2, Javon Tracy 3. If you're taking a look at this, which I don't really recommend it, would rather stack someone else. New Mexico State, Fresno State, 4-point spread in favor of New Mexico. 51 total, which surprised me a little bit. I know New Mexico State plays slow at 129th with a 45% pass rate, but this team is in constant shootouts. They're explosive themselves, and their defense is a sieve. I think this total says more about Mikey Keene, but if you're looking for like sneaky games that you want to boost projections on to get yourself different, I think this game does have a lot of outcomes where it goes over this total. Bet it myself. Pavia, I believe he rivals Zion Webb for best quarterback play on this slate for cash. Again, I think it's 4 running backs is super live. Pavia, 851 rushing yards. Through the air, he's been efficient too. He only throws it 24.5 times, but 207 yards. Like, I think the ceiling's better for Pavia, but the floor is better for Webb, and that's largely just because they're implied for 8 more points in the game, that is, not team total. Backfield, Pavia takes so much. I don't really want to play any of these guys. It's a really good running back slate. We haven't talked about a lot of them. So using Star Thomas, Jamani Jones, Monty Watkins, Mykhilen Young, you're taking a spot that doesn't go to Malik Sherrod, that doesn't go to Genty, to Carson Steele if active, to Taj Brooks, to Jaden Ott. I'm not putting a New Mexico State back in my lineup. If I'm punting, I'd rather just play Anderson Castle. At receiver, New Mexico State did have some transfers, which again, some of these guys weren't really players we wanted to play, but it did consolidate routes for players on the roster. You just don't have as many guys that can siphon away snaps. So some of these guys, Jordan Smith's been injured. Jordan Parker transferred. Trent Hudson transferred. He was a huge one. Tyre Brooks transferred, and P.J. Johnson transferred. So the biggest name here, Trent Hudson, he's your wide receiver 2 on the year. He's averaging 6 targets per game in the last 4. He's gone. So that should solidify Jonathan Brady here as the wide receiver 1. If you already didn't think he was that, you can certainly bank on that now. And then I think your number 2 receiver is Cordell David pretty clearly. He already had a 60% route share. It was up actually at 65% on average over their last 3 games. Now you remove Trent Hudson. I mean, his routes were above 60, 70% in a lot of their most recent contests. The only thing that throws a wrench in this for wide receiver 3 is what do they do with Eli Stowers, who you can see here technically is the quarterback designation. They've been using him as a receiver running back hybrid. He's really hard to play because you need to either put him at QB or super flex, but I think he's going to be your wide receiver 3, followed by Chris Bellamy as your wide receiver 4. And then the rest of our projected routes, we go to Bryce Childress as well, not just Bellamy. And the last one is Donovan Faupel. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correct. Sorry, Donovan. But he saw an increase in his role lately. 50% of the routes in their most recent game. That was a not career high. Maybe it was a career high. It was a season high for him. So I think he's interesting as well. To recap briefly, Brady would be 1, Cordell David 2, Stowers 3, not really playable for DFS because of the position. Bellamy 4, Childress 5, Faupel would be 6. But Faupel's price does stand out. Thomas Wisford at tight end, don't play him. He only has like a 20% route share. Fresno State, 35th in pace, 60% pass rate. I think Mikey Keene's been playing hurt a lot of the year. I don't know. That this game has a lot of, I think, reservations with the 51 total. I'm surprised that Fresno is this big of an underdog. Honestly, I mean, like Mikey Keene, I'm somewhat interested, but man, first of all, he takes a ton of sacks. So the negative 145 yards on the ground, that hurts you a ton. He needs a 300-yard bonus. He's done it a lot this year, but he's also played terribly recently. I think largely because of injury. He's now had close to a month to heal up, but man, it's mainly a price thing with Mikey Keene. I'd rather play a running back, honestly. And it's not like we have to fade Fresno. You can play pass catchers instead of Mikey Keene, but it's just like the Fresno stacks, you run so much risk. Like you could have Eric Brooks, Moss, Delana have good games. If Keene takes 4 sacks, like maybe it's not the stack you want. It's just the receiver one-off or even 2 of them. So we'll skip over running back briefly. I'll come back to it. There has been some change in the routes for Fresno, which these have ebbed and flowed a little bit this year. I'm not sure why, but we did see Brooks come back up to a more secure route rate. I hadn't been playing him for a few weeks because he had 2 weeks in here where he dipped to 36%, 45%. Last 2, 73%. 69%. Brooks is back up at the expense of Jalen Gill, who's been at 35% and 33% last 2 weeks. Efficiency's favored Brooks, so I don't think this is a blip on the radar. I think Brooks is the better play than Jalen Gill, and they're only 100 apart. It's a very easy click. I think you can play a ton of one-off Brooks. The number 2 receiver is Jalen Moss. The 3 is Magdalena. I actually think Magdalena is the better price-adjusted play. This volume, 7.3 targets per game over the last 4 compared to 3.8 targets per game over the last 4 for Moss. He's $1,400 cheaper. I love playing Delana. And then last guy to mention here, you do have Trey Watson at tight end. His routes are solid. He's just not as involved as these guys. But if you need a 4K guy, I think there's a few others we would rather play, like PJ Johnson. But yeah, he's there. You could click his name. At running back, Malik Sherrod is a full bell cow. They've been struggling a lot recently, so we've seen the carries dip. That's just because of negative game script. But Sherrod is an awesome pass game role. So to briefly touch on that, 4.5 targets per game over the last 4. This guy's still getting at 20 touches routinely. Only 1 out of the last 4 games failing to reach that mark, and he still hit 15. New Mexico State's defense is atrocious against the run and the pass. Sherrod firmly in play, even as an underdog. This is a volatile game. Fresno could easily win it. 2 games left. Boise, UCLA, 4.5-point spread in favor of UCLA, 48.5 total. Interesting game. Boise's 98th in pace with a 40.5% pass rate. Taylon Green's in the portal. Maddox Madsen is out for the year. We're getting a CJ Tiller start. He's a freshman. He's a new quarterback. What we know about him is not great. He's not mobile. In his high school career, 3 years as a starter, 80 rushing yards, 92 rushing yards, 131 rushing yards. His per attempt averages are actually really good. It looks like he can run, he just doesn't do it. As a passer, I mean, kind of concerning, man. He only completed 33 or 53% of his passes as a senior. And I don't know. It's not like Boise's getting high recruits. He has a month to prepare. So, I mean, crazier things have happened. The best thing working in his favor is he's 4,500. He's the stone minimum on DraftKings. So there are a lot of lineups that are going to look awesome with him involved. He's going to project well as a value piece. My question for you guys watching the video, and I don't have the answer, maybe you have a preference, which is why I'm asking. You don't need to punt everywhere. Do you want to punt with Anderson Castle? Use one of your running back spots. Do you want to punt with Tiller? Use one of your quarterback spots. Do you want to punt at receiver with like PJ Johnson? I think the least opportunity cost comes from punting receiver. We don't have any stud receivers on this slate. There's no Troy Franklin, Roma Dunes, Neighbors, but there are stud running backs. There's quarterbacks that can run. So I don't have a ton of interest in Tiller, but I mean, I'm playing a lot of lineups. I'm sure I'll have a little bit, but yeah, he's not going to be anyone I'm hitching my wagon to. At running back, Genti and Helani, 50-50 split here. I think this is what we see again moving forward. It's Helani's last game. So the only thing I'm worried about is, do they just roll out the red carpet for Helani? He's done a lot for them in his career and just let him run into the back of the O-line as he's done for years now. Or do they let Genti play his normal workload? Genti already announced his intention to return, so he'll be out there. Genti just vastly more efficient. So you could play them both. Another thing with Boise is on a third-string quarterback, I think maybe even they increase their run rate more. Whether they win or lose, they're just evaluating talent. So we saw 20 carries from both of them in the last game. You could see that again this week. I think you're probably looking at like 15 apiece floor. Receiving game, these guys are going to project well just because everyone's injured or transferred. Eric McAllister's gone. Stephen Cobbs is injured. Chase Penry and Shea Whiting are out. So your top 3 receivers are Billy Bowens, Prince Strahan, and Austin Bolt. In the last 3 games, Bolt has the best role. Bolt is the min price. Bolt is still going to come with immense risk. Target counts of 3, 5, 3, 2 last 4 games. Bowens and Strahan, they're very similar. Throw your darts on Boise carefully. They're players I'm comfortable coming in underweight just because this team might throw the ball 12 times. UCLA, they're the favorite in the game, 11th in pace, a pretty balanced 47.5% pass rate. Dante Moore is in the portal, so Ethan Garbers is going to start this game. Colin Schlee, still not sure on his status. He's not going to start or take a lot of passing stuff, but if he's active, he'll siphon off some design carries from Garbers, which does hurt his bottom line. So I have more interest in Garbers if Schlee is out. But Boise's defense is horrifyingly bad, allowing over 8 yards per pass attempt through the air, very giving on the ground. UCLA is favored. They're actually fairly intact. So I have pretty good interest in Garbers for GPPs. He doesn't take a ton of sacks, fairly efficient as a passer. It's just not a strong quarterback slate. So I will play lineups that just have him, using Genti runbacks and stuff, and stacking him with Logan Loya, J. Michael Sturdivant. They're very easy. And Kyle Ford should be clearly the number 3 receiver right now. Cam Brown did enter the portal. Last thing to mention here, they also had Carson Ryan, who's labeled a running back for some reason. He's actually a tight end. He entered the portal, so Moliki Matavao and Hudson Habermel should split tight end reps. Maybe you have more interest in Matavao, but I would straight up rather play Ford, who no longer has Cam Brown to compete with. At running back, it's basically been a 50-50 committee between Carson Steele and TJ Harden. They ride the hot hand. I'm not sure why, because Steele's been more efficient. I would rather play Steele here, but TJ Harden has been favored slightly in the pass game. Yeah, I don't know. It's not the best running back situation. It's not the worst. I think for GPPs, it's fine. We'll rank the top 5 at the end of this slate. You won't see Harden or Steele there, but they're still certainly in play. Final game, Texas Tech Cal, 3-point spread in favor of Texas Tech, 57.5 total. Texas Tech runs the air raid, 16th in pace, 51% pass rate. They've morphed a little bit. They lost Tyler Shugg earlier in the year. He's in the portal. Baron Morton has been a lackluster floor general, if you will, I guess. He doesn't run. He doesn't have good passing efficiency, but he throws with volume, so he has gotten there a few times. Cal's defense is terrible. They do have portal losses on defense. Their best edge rusher is gone, a started corner. So things should be a little more open for him. But honestly, they just might ride Tosh Brooks, who announced his intention to return next year, I should say. He's averaging 25 touches per game. Tosh Brooks is probably the best just raw play on the slate. Just play him, make him a priority. In the receiving game, they lost a ton to the portal. Jaron Bradley, Miles Price, those are your top 2 guys, gone. From there, there's a bunch of ancillary receivers like Louis Fungi, J.J. Sparkman, tight end Jaden York. They're all in the portal too. So your top 3 receivers are looking like Xavier White, Coy Eakin, and Dre McCray. I think number 1 is going to be Eakin. His routes are just dominant lately. He's averaging 7.3 targets per game last 3. Xavier White should be the 2, and I think Dre McCray is your 3. That's the order I'm prioritizing them, and I'm not sure you want to get any deeper. Jordan Brown, I think I would rank 4. Honestly, it's close between Dre McCray and Jordan Brown. 5, I would say, is Brady Boyd, but not a lot of confidence. Those are just big GPP guys. On the Cal side, Texas Tech's defense has been roasted lately as well. We just saw them get decimated by Texas in their finale. Fernando Mendoza is cheap, so I have a lot of interest in Fernando Mendoza. It's laughable that he's cheaper than Henry Hessen. Doesn't take a lot of sacks, which has contributed to 80 rushing yards. As a passer, he's been fine. He's just been knocked out of a couple games, so his yards per game and stuff doesn't look good. 181. Just know that there's some injury stuff, noise in those box scores. As far as price adjustments go, Mendoza's among the top quarterbacks. I still prefer the rushers like Pavia and Webb. But yeah, if you need a cheap guy, I'd rather play Mendoza than Hessen or something. Backfield, a couple of injuries, things to watch. Isaiah Ifanse hasn't played in multiple weeks. They were using a closer to a 50-50 committee between him and Ott. Ott still definitely led it, but Ifanse was active. Justin Williams-Thomas, who has played recently, he gets there in blowouts. Cal demolished their opponent in their last game. But if Ifanse is out, Ott has this insane workload, 23.5 touches per game, over 114 rush yards, good pass catcher. Ott is a very good play. Anytime he's on the slate would be better if Ifanse missed again. Receiving game, Taj Davis is away from the team, so we now have Jeremiah Hunter as your very clear 1. I do think he's worth paying up for if you can find the 6,100. You have Tron Grizzle as your 2, and then I think we're looking at some combination of Monroe Young and Maven Anderson as your 3. Brian Hightower hasn't played in a lot of weeks, so I don't know what the deal is with him. We haven't projected lightly, but I do think that wide receiver 3 is a split. I'm focusing my attention on Hunter and Tron Grizzle with Hunter being a clear priority. Tight end Jack Endress is actually pretty involved too. You just don't have very good efficiency with him. Like, he clearly trails Hunter and Tron Grizzle in terms of efficiency and yardage, but he's at least mentionable. All right, before we head out, we'll do top 5 per position on DraftKings and FanDuel. Keep this a little quicker. So at quarterback, I'll try to talk through it. Have Zion Webb 1. It's mainly a implied team total thing, 59 points for the total versus Diego Pavia, who's 2, 51 points there in the game total. I'm flirting with it. Zion Webb's also cheaper, much cheaper on DraftKings, $8,600 for Pavia, $7K for Webb. The third value is Tiller. This is a price thing. Basically, if you play every single snap at quarterback, you're going to project as a value. I hope I articulated the concerns with him, even at stone minimum. I think there's just a value proposition and an opportunity cost question. Where would you rather take your value? For me, it's a receiver. And then 4 and 5, Mendoza and Garbers rounding out quarterback. I think there's upside with both. Running back, Taj Brooks is 1, no question there. 2 is Malik Sherrod for Fresno State. Our third value is actually Jacob Caboti, which is interesting. We do have Draylon Washington projected in, but we have him projected for a minimal workload, so this will change depending on Draylon Washington's status. 4 is Jaden Ott, and 5, we have Anderson Castle, 3,300, so he projects slightly ahead of Genty, who's 6, in terms of price-adjusted value. Same thing with Castle, as we talked about with Tiller. Where do you want to take your value? I prefer receiver. Last one, PJ Wells tops this list. I mean, he just played 90% of the routes with Jacksonville State. So, yeah, that makes sense. Coy Eakin, 2 for Texas Tech. Ton of opt-outs there. Makes sense. Caden Robinson, 3. Logan Loya, 4. And then we have the Boise receivers, 5. Already mentioned concerns with them. Heading over to FanDuel, top 5 values, not going to look too different. It's Webb, 1. Pavia, 2. Tiller, 3. Chandler Fields, 4. He's just way cheaper over here. He's Louisiana Lafayette. And then Mendoza comes in at 5. For running backs, I don't anticipate much difference here either. Taj Brooks, 1, Sherrod, 2, Jaden Ott, 3, Cabote's 4, George Halani is 5. You have a severe price gap between him and Genty on this site. But overall, it's pretty close. And then at receiver for FanDuel, we have Coy Eakin, 1, Jonathan Brady, 2 for New Mexico State. He's really cheap. Jordan Brown comes in at 3. He's the stone minimum. It's basically 3 of the top 4 are Texas Tech receivers. You can clearly see they were anticipating Jaron and Price playing. So I wouldn't, even though they're 3 of the top 4, I wouldn't play all of them. But it's Eakin, Brady, Brown, White. Then it goes PJ Wells, Eric Brooks, followed by Logan Loya. But thank you guys for watching. It's a long time for a 6-game slate. I appreciate you. We'll be back talking every single game through bowl season. Check out the bowl promo. Link in the video description below. Get yourself 50% off all our stuff. Ownership projections, whatever, this data sheet, we have it. Also, if you have a question, reach out on Twitter. I'm at Matt_Gajewski. Otherwise, we'll be back on Monday, I believe, talking the Western Kentucky Showdown. Until then, good luck. We'll catch you later.